First light slides into a tight ravine, the ridgelines rising like jaws that shape a natural kill zone. The ground looks simple from above and complicated underfoot. Wind moves dust in thin threads that give nothing away. Radio traffic collides in headsets, calls stacking on top of each other until meaning blurs. Terrain masking kills line of sight, and the net falls into a white hiss. The canyon feels like it swallowed every voice. An RPG-7 detonates at the rear and slams the exit shut with rock and dust. Stones rattle down the walls, and the way out is gone. Breathing tastes like grit, and time gets loud. Close air support is off the table. A low cloud ceiling presses the sky down. The valley is too narrow for safe attack runs. And density altitude steals rotor lift near the ridges. No one is flying into this slot without risk that outweighs help. First, Lieutenant James Walker keeps words short and clean. Hold position. Find real cover. Not concealment. Sergeant Michael Torres moves the line by habit and grit. He fixes spacing, resets sectors, and keeps helmets low against stone that can stop bullets. Nothing flashy. Only what keeps people alive. Specialist Emily Carter moves on instinct. Gloves ready. She prepares march without running the full ladder yet. Her eyes track muzzle directions and backstops before every shift. Specialist Ryan Kim angles an AN PRC-117G toward a thin slice of sky, while an AN PRC-152 rides on his chest. He hunts for a window the canyon might allow. The hiss fights back. Bodies settle into real cover as magazines are checked and sectors confirmed. Brush hides, shapes. Rock stops rounds. Cover beats concealment every time. The valley goes quiet for a breath that feels borrowed. If the sky refuses help and the canyon eats radios, what is left to carry them forward? They moved before sunrise while the ground still held its night chill. The patrol started as a loose wedge across the open flats. Then the ravine pressed in and the formation tightened into a careful file. Short SLLS halts set the pace like quiet commas. The unit listened for wind against rock and for small sounds that did not belong. Eyes read the ground for scuffed dust and faint tracks that argued with the map. The first signs were small and honest. Spent brass winked from pockets of dirt below the ridge. Shallow fighting positions watched the floor from angles that could own it in a minute. First Lieutenant James Walker kept orders simple to survive first contact. Hold. Find real cover and confirm sectors with calm eyes and clean hands. Sergeant Michael Torres floated between elements like a moving hinge. He corrected spacing before the rock could trick depth and distance. He prepped the team to peel if pressure spiked and lanes began to collapse. Specialist Emily Carter walked near the rear of the lead element on purpose. From there, she could sprint forward or fall back without crossing muzzles. She ran march in her head while her gloves stayed ready. Specialist Ryan Kim carried 2 radios because the canyon could be cruel. An AN PRC-152 handled near communications. An AN PRC-117G waited for extended line of sight or SATCOM when a slice of sky opened. He marked pockets where a signal might escape later. A white patch of sky above a break in stone. A higher bend where a mass could catch a clean path to the Tactical Operations Center. The kit looked ordinary because ordinary works. M4, a 1 carbines rode with 30-round magazines seated tight and checked. 1 M240L stood as the base of fire, with binoculars and a waterproof grid map in reach. Weather slid low and cool and stayed there. A ceiling hovered that could box out aircraft if things went wrong. Damp air felt like it would eat radio reach one hill at a time. The path ahead began to narrow with intent. Choke points formed where the walls drew closer and the exits grew worse. Egress looked like a thought that might not survive a bad minute. First Lieutenant James Walker repeated the plan in the same plain way. Keep the file clean. Keep sectors honest, and make cover mean rock, not brush that only hides shapes. Sergeant Michael Torres checked the team again and let silence do the teaching. Boots picked careful ground, and rifles stayed indexed. No one outran their lane or chased a view they could not see. The ravine felt like a promise that should not be kept. It looked simple on the map and complicated underfoot. The plan stayed simple enough to survive contact, which was the point. The ambush breaks without warning. An RPG-7 slams into the rear wall and the exit collapses. Rock slides. Dust blooms. And the floor turns hostile. Small arms open from both ridgelines. Fire crosses in clean geometry that owns the center. Every step is inside a web. First Lieutenant James Walker cuts the chaos with short orders. Hold. Real cover. Not concealment. Confirm sectors with helmets low. Sergeant Michael Torres leads a push toward the right slope to steal an angle. Higher ground answers with disciplined bursts that spark stone inches from faces. He signals no-go and resets sectors with a flat hand. A ranger drops with a leg wound. Specialist Emily Carter moves on instinct with calm hands. Tourniquet high and tight. Time marked. Bleeding control confirmed. She checks airway and breathing. She confirms circulation and runs a head-to-toe reassessment by March. She tucks the casualty behind real cover and manages shock while watching backstops. Specialist Ryan Kim angles an AN PRC 117G toward a thin slice of sky while an AN PRC 152 rides on his chest. Terrain masking swallows his call to the Tactical Operations Center and returns a white hiss. COMSEC keeps the platoon net locked so no outsider rides their traffic. Ammo discipline starts to buy minutes. M4, A1, carbines speak in controlled pairs only when a sector demands it. The M240L throws short controlled bursts to pin helmets when a lane heats, then falls back to sustained to save belts. Target calls roll by sector. Nothing doubles and nothing is missed. Every roll stays inside its lane, so gaps do not open. Every rise of a helmet draws fresh impacts. Sparks kick off stone and chip the cover thin. Hands learn to read the rhythm and stay low. Help from above is not coming. Close air support is off the table because the cloud ceiling sits low and the valley is too narrow for safe attack runs. Attack helicopters face poor visibility and density altitude that choose lift near the ridgelines. Mortars look tempting until math enters. Danger close for an 81mm is about 200 meters. Danger close for a 120mm is about 400 meters. Elevation and friendlies are inside those rings. Error here does not forgive. The call is made to keep indirect off the fight. Walker holds the platoon on the floor instead of pushing blind uphill across crossing fires. The order is simple and correct for this ground. Stay low. Confirm sectors. Let cover do the work. Rate of fire calms to something that buys minutes. Brass slows and thinking returns. Breathing steadies behind rock that stops rounds. Torres manages the tempo like a metronome. The gun team keeps the M240L in sustained until heads lift. When pressure spikes, they give a short burst and then settle it down again. Carter watches muzzle directions before every pull or drag of the litter. She checks the tourniquet and confirms a warm, distal pulse. She keeps the casualty small and safe behind real cover. Kim hunts another window. He raises the ANPRC 117G into a new slit of sky and tests the path. The canyon answers with the same soft hiss and then goes quiet. Time leans the wrong way. Magazines feel lighter. Options shrink. And the valley holds its breath. The kill zone wants them to rush and make mistakes. Walker refuses to give it that mistake. He repeats the simple rules that keep people alive on days like this. Hold. Real cover. Confirm sectors. Then, a single suppressed crack rises from far on the ridge. It is quiet under the noise, and yet everyone hears it. The ravine pauses as if waiting to understand what has changed. Specialist Emily Carter keeps her world small and steady. Tourniquet, high and tight with the time marked on tape. Bleeding control confirmed with a quick check of dressings. She reassesses airway and breathing. Then runs circulation and a head-to-toe sweep until a warm distal pulse answers back. She never forgets muzzle awareness. Before every pull or drag of the litter, she looks at backstops and angles. Then she moves. The casualty stays tucked behind rock that actually stops bullets. First Lieutenant James Walker holds the platoon on the ravine floor. He refuses to push blind into slopes where crossing fires wait. The ground dictates patience, and he listens. Sergeant Michael Torres manages the tempo like a line coach. M4. A1 carbines stay in controlled pairs only when a sector demands it. The M240L rises for short controlled bursts to pin helmets, then settles back to sustained to conserve belts. Pressure spikes during a peel, and he opens a brief, rapid window of 10 to 15 seconds. The gun team breaks the push and then drops right back to sustained. Brass slows and thinking returns. Target calls keep rolling by sector. No lane doubles and no gap appears. Each voice owns a slice of the fight and nothing more. A quick teaching beat runs through the line without a speech. Cover is not concealment. Rock that stops bullets beats, brush that only hides shapes. Sector discipline becomes the invisible safety rope. It keeps people tied to their lanes when rock and scrub play tricks on depth and distance. It also prevents friendly fire when vision fails at the edge of a boulder. Carter checks the tourniquet again and verifies a warm, distal pulse. She keeps the litter angle low and chooses ground that will not roll under boots. Calm hands and clean steps, by seconds that add up. Walker watches helmets stay low, while rifles index to honest sectors. Torres nods once when the M240L breathes back into sustained. Carbines hold their pairs until a head rises and then go quiet. Minutes have been purchased and the noise feels organized. The platoon breathes together behind stone that earns the name cover. They are ready to move when the next opening appears. Specialist Ryan Kim works the radios like a patient craft. An AN PRC-152 handles near communications inside the platoon. An AN PRC-117G waits for extended line of sight or SATCOM when the canyon offers a thin slice of sky. He angles the long whip and tests for a path to the Tactical Operations Center. A window opens for a heartbeat, and a fragment of traffic slides through. Then terrain masking closes in, and the net falls back to a soft hiss. COMSEC keeps the platoon net locked and clean. Only their voices ride the traffic. It is the right call when pressure climbs and confusion is expensive. Close air support is off the table for reasons that do not care about wishes. The cloud ceiling sits low and presses the flight deck down. The valley is too narrow for safe attack runs, and density altitude choose rotor lift near the ridge lines. Indirect fire looks tempting until numbers sharpen the edges. Danger close for an 81mm mortar is about 200 meters. Danger close for a 120mm mortar is about 400 meters. And elevation, plus friendlies inside those rings, make error unforgiving. So, mortars are set aside, and the platoon solves the fight with what they carry. Ammunition is managed by sector, so no one burns a belt or a magazine out of habit. Calls prevent doubled lanes and make sure dead space does not grow. M4. A1 carbines stay in controlled pairs that only answer real targets. The M240L rises into short controlled bursts when heads lift, then drops back to sustained to keep belts alive. The gun team tracks brass and barrel time without drama. First Lieutenant James Walker keeps people on the ravine floor where cover is honest. He refuses to push blind into slopes where crossing fires wait for a mistake. The order is simple, and it is correct for this ground. Sergeant Michael Torres runs the tempo so thinking can return. He gives a rapid window only when appeal needs it. 10 to 15 seconds, and no more. After that, the line breathes back into sustained, and the noise becomes useful. Kim tries another angle with the AN PRC 117G and notes a brief check from the Tactical Operations Center. Exfil is inbound with no promises. The canyon takes the window back, and the work continues. Limits are real and respected. Help is not coming from above today, and that is fine. Discipline and timing can still carry the day. Eleanor Hart waits in a rock and scrub hide about 300 meters above the ravine floor. Her body settles into the slope until she looks like another pocket of shadow. Patience makes her small, and the ground hides the rest. Her ghillie is cut for stone and dry brush. Netting holds shale dust and clipped stems that match the palette of the ridge. At 5 meters, she would pass for weathered shade. Her rifle is a bolt-action chambered in .300 Winchester Magnum, a field twin to the M2010 ESR. The optic carries a clean reticle for dialing elevation and holding wind. A bipod plants the fore-end so every press stays honest. A suppressor sits at the muzzle, and she has the point of impact shift recorded in her dope. 0 lives at 100 meters, because that is where testing tells the truth. A bubble level rides the rail to keep Cant from bending shots. She builds the shot the same way every time. She dials elevation on the turret and holds wind off a Kestrel 5,700 with applied ballistics. Then she cross-checks with dust tails and the lean of short grasses. COMSEC keeps her off the platoon net, and she accepts the boundary. Before sunrise, she passed route concerns to the Tactical Operations Center and the Battalion S3 over SATCOM and Iridium. The change died in the chain, and the patrol kept the plan. Target precedence is a quiet list she repeats in her head. The man with the RPG's 7-tube first. Then the base of fire gunner with the belt fed. Then the leader who moves squads with his hands. Breath sets the metronome. 4 in. Hold. 6 out. The reticle settles, and the press is smooth. The rifle coughs, and the upper thoracic on the RPG man folds into the dust. The ridge stutters as control leaks out of the ambush. A radio hand signals from the rear of a cluster. She nudges a fraction for wind and takes the chest. And the hand stops talking. A belt gun flashes from a shallow scrape and tries to rebuild pressure. She waits for a brief lull in the gusts so the mirage steadies. The third round lands high chest, and the lane opens. 1 shot, 1 problem removed is not a slogan to her. It is a way to spend time and ammunition like a scarce currency. She wastes nothing on show or on suppression. Below, the platoon feels the pause after each distant crack. Helmets lift, then settle. Movement starts to obey the timing of a single calm shooter who gives them space instead of orders. Eleanor resets the rifle and checks the bubble level again. Dope stays true, and the Kestrel number matches what the ground is whispering. She returns to the glass and waits for the next small moment that turns risk into room. The first distant crack resets the field like a clock. A short pocket of quiet opens, and Sergeant Michael Torres uses it to bound 10 meters into real cover. Helmets stay low, and muzzles point down. He picks destinations that are rock, not brush. Rock stops, bullets, and brush only hides shapes. The line breathes in, moves, and locks back into sectors. The support element manages tempo with care. The M240L holds a steady, sustained rhythm, while lanes are cool. It rises into short, controlled bursts only when heads lift on the ridge. M4, A1, carbines stay in controlled pairs inside assigned sectors. No one doubles a lane or sprays into blind angles. The geometry on the floor stays clean and honest. Specialist Emily Carter rechecks the casualty during each pause. Tourniquet is secure and time is noted. Distal pulse is warm. and airway and breathing are reassessed with steady hands. She watches muzzle directions and backstops before every pull or drag of the litter. Safety comes first, and speed comes second. The patient stays small behind stone that earns the word cover. Specialist Ryan Kim goes back on the antenna and hunts a path. He angles the AN PRC 117G into a thin slice of sky and catches a brief link to the Tactical Operations Center. The window closes and the canyon returns a soft hiss. He notes exfil inbound with no promises and gets back to work. The AN PRC 152 keeps near communications honest and short. COMSEC keeps the net clean and free of outsiders. Above them, Eleanor Hart stays on the glass. She checks the bubble level and verifies dope. Then cross-checks Kestrel 5700 wind with dust tails and short grass. The optic steadies and the world narrows. She places an upper thoracic shot that opens a lane. A spotter shows posture and she makes a small wind correction and presses again. A fighter reaches for an RPG-7 and she pins the chest during a brief lull. One shot, one problem removed is her ethic. Not a slogan. She wastes nothing on show or suppression. Time and ammunition stay treated like a scarce currency. The enemy begins to fire wide as panic creeps in. Hips and elbows overexpose while they search for a ghost that will not speak on the radio. Their calls overlap and reveal more than they hide. A pulse of fire flares from the left ridge, and Torres calls a clean peel. One element moves while the other covers. Smooth and quick. The M240L goes rapid for 10 to 15 seconds to break pressure, then returns to sustained. First Lieutenant James Walker leads with hand signals more than words. He confirms sectors, keeps the platoon on the ravine floor, and reminds the team that cover is not concealment. The order fits the ground, and the ground agrees. With each cycle, the unit moves like a plan instead of a reaction. A shot lands, and a bound of 10 or 20 meters follows. The team resets behind rock and takes a breath that feels earned. Opposition fire loses its tempo and drifts into the margins. Distance opens a little at a time, and the angles look less cruel. Hope returns as a practical thing built from timing and discipline. Distance begins to open in inches, not strides. Opposition fire loses tempo and drifts wide. Small gains stack into space that did not exist a minute ago. High on the ridge, Eleanor Hart reads an uphill shot at roughly 750 to 800 meters. Her rifle is a bolt-action chambered in .300 Winchester Magnum, a field twin to the M2010 ESR. The line to target climbs through thin wind and rock heat. She dials elevation on the turret for the slope that steals a little of the range. Wind hold comes from a Kestrel 5700 with applied ballistics. Then she cross-checks with dust tails and the lean of short grass. A bubble level keeps the rifle honest against cant. The reticle settles and the press is smooth. The round lands upper thoracic on a fighter, easing from cover. A belt-fed sputters and goes quiet while spotters fold into holes. On the floor, First Lieutenant James Walker raises a closed fist for hold. Weapons stay safe, ready as each ranger sweeps an assigned sector from solid cover. No one breaks discipline to chase a shadow. They make no reach for a miracle. The unit waits for the trap inside the trap and meets only wind and dust. Patience is a plan, not a feeling. Cover is not concealment, and the ground repeats the lesson. Rock that stops bullets sets the endpoint for every bound. Brush that only hides shapes is ignored. Movement happens only in the quiet that follows each distant crack. 10 meters. Then 10 more. To stone that earns the word cover. Helmets stay low, and muzzles track safe angles. The soundscape shifts from fire to wind. Dust settles into seams where boots scraped minutes ago. The valley starts to breathe, like it remembers calm. Sectors are confirmed with quick hand checks and short words. The M240L holds posture without waste, ready to rise only when a head lifts. Carbines wait in controlled silence for targets that actually exist. Time finally tilts toward patience. The math that punished them now favors clean timing and clear thinking. Space opens a little at a time, and control returns to steady hands. Eleanor Hart steps down from the ridge with perfect muzzle awareness. Her rifle rides slung safe, and her hands stay visible. Each step is deliberate and places her feet on firm rock rather than loose scree. The platoon freezes behind cover as First Lieutenant James Walker raises a closed fist. He runs a clean challenge and reply sequence that matches without drama. Muzzles dip just enough to show trust, while sectors stay assigned and eyes remain on backstops. Specialist Emily Carter keeps priority on the casualty. She verifies the tourniquet high and tight, confirms bleeding control, and checks a warm distal pulse. She watches muzzle directions and backstops during every small reposition of the litter. The handover arrives as a waterproof range card on a flat rock. The grid is clean with arrows and times that mark movement. Crossfire overlap is sketched, and a blind seam is circled where a slip became possible. Fixes are simple and specific. Shift the observation post 20 meters to gain the choke point. Rotate sectors 5 degrees and tie the left element to a point of domination that watches the exit cut. Cover beats concealment becomes the standing rule. Rock that stops bullets sets every destination before any peel. Every trooper confirms a safe backstop with one more quick look. Communications and security are clarified without exposing identities. COMSEC kept the platoon net closed, and that was correct. Before sunrise, route concerns went to the Tactical Operations Center and the Battalion S3 over SATCOM and Iridium. And now the field stays clean of extra information. Leadership happens in a quiet exchange. First Lieutenant James Walker listens without interrupting and asks only for the next step. Eleanor returns to basics and lets the card do most of the talking, while she frames the day as discipline on the floor and her role as making space for it. The team resets around the plan with calm hands. Security remains tight, and sectors are confirmed with short checks. The gun team holds posture, while the radio operator notes any exfil window that opens. The fixes are doable, and the movement is clear. Hand signals replace noise as positions shift by small gains. Each element rehearses the peel routes that match the new angles and the point of domination. They stand ready without ceremony. Respect sits in the way rifles stay indexed, and in the way eyes keep scanning. The platoon is prepared to execute the next movement with clean timing and steady control. A UH-60M rides the wind down the valley as the crew scans the ridgelines. They hold a safe height against gusts and tight rock walls, while the approach stays measured. Brownout threatens near the pickup point as dust lifts and swirls. The crew chief gives a steady wave in and keeps the glide path honest. First Lieutenant James Walker keeps the platoon in cover with weapons on safe. Eyes stay on backstops while he sets the loading order with hand signals. Specialist Emily Carter kneels behind rock and builds a clean 9-line medevac. She confirms the tourniquet and pressure dressing, reassesses breathing, and checks a warm distal pulse. She briefs the litter team over engine noise in short, clear lines. The patient is ready to move the moment the aircraft settles. A crosswind kicks grit and steals vision near the lane. Sergeant Michael Torres calls a brief peel to clear space, and the M240L answers with short, controlled bursts, only when a true threat shows. The helicopter settles on wheels and landing gear and holds a careful hover taxi. Rangers move by file with hands on straps as chins and rucks are secured. Belts are checked without wasting a second, and the load flows. The crew chief locks eyes and nods the last chalk aboard. On the intercom, the pilot asks about the sniper who steadied the day. Heads tip toward a distant slope where Eleanor Hart folds her hide and brushes sign from stone. COMSEC kept her off the platoon net, and that boundary stands. She meets First Lieutenant James Walker with a small nod that says, "Enough." She turns uphill and vanishes into rock and scrub inside 50 meters as the bird lifts. The valley drops away in dust and wind, while calm procedure carries everyone home. Back at the patrol base, the story moves in quiet voices. Success is counted by boots that returned under their own power. Faces look a little older, and the air smells like dust and coffee. Practical changes go on paper before memory fades. Route planning gets hard checks that stop any drift toward known kill zones, with decision points mapped before anyone steps off. An observation post is pre-selected that actually sees the choke points instead of a pretty view. Radio preparation adds a line of sight check to the timeline. Teams rehearse where an AN PRC 117G can reach the Tactical Operations Center if the canyon swallows everything else. Near communications on the AN PRC 152 stay simple and short so the net remains clean. Exfil options are briefed with terrain notes rather than wishful thinking. Sectors tighten to match the ground, and interlocking fires are drawn to the real angles. A point of domination is chosen that watches likely approaches without walking into them. Cover over concealment sits at the top of the checklist. Every peel begins with one backstop glance, so a safe lane exists before anyone moves. The reminder about limits is written in plain ink that when the ceiling is low and the valley is narrow, aircraft cannot solve the fight you stepped into. Eleanor Hart is treated like a compass rather than a legend. Her waterproof range card carries quiet weight because it turns lessons into fixes. People go back to work with steadier hands. Stone. Dust. A steady breath. One distant crack. Then the wind returns to the ravine and the ground feels honest again. What looked like a dead end becomes a lesson you can carry. Cover beats concealment because rock that stops bullets is not the same as brush that hides a shape. The platoon lived that truth one bound at a time until calm thought came back. When the noise rose again, they remembered the rule and chose stone. One shot, one problem removed, because patience and clean work change pressure into space. The metronome of a single steady shooter opened lanes and gave timing back to the team. Small windows turned into movement, then into control. Retired is not indifferent, because experience still shows up when it matters. If you want a range card and danger close, quick reference built from the day, comment range. The values are simple and correct for this terrain. 80, 1 mm, about 200 meters, and 120 mm, about 400 meters. You will get a short downloadable checklist that respects real United States Army practice and keeps the language plain. It will help you see why discipline and timing matter when help is not coming from above. Thank you for watching. And a quiet thank you to every professional who keeps people alive by staying calm.